There was no wrongdoing, and the former minister fully cooperated. She referred herself a week ago Monday. I got the report yesterday, and she resigned yesterday afternoon. Compare that with the shadow foreign secretary, who breached the ministerial code. Her predecessor, Bartu, ignored it. It was the advisor that then had to resign because he wasn't taken seriously. And she's now serving the leader of the opposition. What a contrast. Thank God the British public chucked them out.
Welcome to Quiet Riot, the politics podcast whose 10-year guilt returns have never looked better. I'm Andreou.
And I'm Naomi Smith, the long-term yield to Alex's bond. Every week we turn down the heat and increasingly frequently turn up the bleeps with one aim.
To leave you a little better informed and a little less anxious.
Now kick off your shoes, put your feet up and join us for another Quiet Riot.
Hello and welcome to Quiet Riot. I'm Alex.
And I'm Naomi. By the end of this week, Labour will have been in power for 200 days. We survey their bumpy start.
Plus, the thing we dreaded is finally here. Trump 2.0 is about to be inaugurated. What will the next few months look like? And to help us navigate the Scillas and Charybdis ahead, we have our favourite North London lefty liberal.
Oi! I live in Stockwell.
It's Zoe Williams.
Hi. Let the record show I have never lived in North London. Yes, hi. I'm really happy to be here.
Zoe, you quit Facebook this week. How does it feel?
I never used it. I used
so no
to,
change.
so it's absolutely no change to my
Empty gesture,
lifestyle. A completely empty gesture. And then when I quit Instagram, it's going to have exactly the same impact. I like Instagram for other people's babies, but apart from that, I just have to go and see them in real life.
The Meta platform we're all hooked on is WhatsApp.
Well, that's fine.
Is that a metaphor?
Yeah.
Don't we just go to Signal? I mean, that's really
I'm on
easy.
Signal.
Why must you spoil everything?
No, I'm really happy to. As long as everybody moves with me, I'll move to Signal. But
That's how I feel about North London.
But that is what happened with Twitter and Blue Sky, and it was in fact you, Alex, who made me go to Blue Sky when I had no interest in doing that. Yeah,
it's
you really
nice
did.
though, isn't it?
And I was actually really surprised. I was thinking, this is not like Alex to try and make me do a thing. But it's really nice. And by the time, immediately overnight, everything I liked about Twitter was there and everything I hated was not there. So it's fine.
Do you think we might see a kind of wider rejection of social media in general? Because I've seen a lot of people going, do you know what? I'm happy to leave Facebook or leave Twitter and not replace it with anything.
I definitely see in my kids who are 15 and 17, they don't need kind of big platform stuff. They need their friends, and they use Snapchat. And Snapchat is the most invasive, paranoia-inducing thing I've ever encountered in my life. But
that's the one where the messages basically, they disappear.
They disappear, but there's also Snap Maps, so you can see where all your friends are. You can see if they're all in the same place and you're not there. If your girlfriend turns her location off, then you know she's turned her location off. It's a nightmare. But it's not the same. It's not the same kind of mass platform, and you're getting information about each other in quite an old-fashioned kind of geo-triangulating way, rather than in our kind of old-fashioned, but like more new-fashioned Facebook way, where you're kind of presenting an image of yourself and how much fun you're having. They're kind of guessing how much fun each other are having by who is in which postcode. It's an investigative thing. Yeah, it's like they say about forensic triangulation when you try and work out who a dead body is, but except it's with their friends.
I've heard that a lot of young people are now rejecting smartphones, and it's actually quite cool to have like an ancient Nokia 3210
with access.
Nothing.
Yeah, but
and that's it.
I mean, what I need to tell you about young people is that they're full of shit. So they will have a Nokia, but they will also have a smartphone.
I remember people saying that Facebook was where you lied to your friends and Twitter was where you were honest with strangers.
What is happening now? There's a lot of, I remember in my day.
In the good old days.
I see young people. What is happening? We've become completely different. There's the one about the guys that watch war movies. I think we're turning into that.
Which
podcast.
guys?
There's
Oh my God, yeah.
We're just two guys watching war films.
Well,
and I
I'm
think
happy
we are
to.
slowly turning
I'm
into
happy
that.
to diversify, as long as instead of war films, it's Ginger Rogers films.
This week, Starmer will have been PM for 200 days. How time flies when you're having... Oh, never mind. On Quiet Riot, we've frequently mentioned the poor communication issues the government has had, and more recently, we've looked at their bumpy budget. This week, in fresh turmoil, Government Minister with remit for anti-corruption, Tulip Siddiq, resigned following investigations into her property ownership and links to the Awami League in Bangladesh. Zoe, during the general election campaign, when a Conservative candidate was embroiled in a corruption scandal over Gamblegate, if you remember, Starmer's response to Sunak not immediately dropping them was, if it was one of my candidates, they'd be gone and their feet would not have touched the floor.
Oh my God! It was actually his response that reminded me of what Gamblegate was. It was when they bet on the election being called. Right. Yeah, and this is rather more serious than that, of course, because the maximum payout for a niche bet, as I believe they're called, was £1,000, whereas this is 3 properties, two of which one of which is owned by her sister, I think, one of which is part owned by her mother and part owned by her. I've always really liked Tulip, so I'm not an anti-corruption investigator, and I don't know anything about Bangladeshi property ownership law or indeed money, their politics or how they get money out of the country and where they stash it.
You do know British politics.
I do know British politics. And I have to say, the word on the street is that this is a Keir blind spot. He gives jobs to his, if you're a friend or an ally or a confidant of his, you've got an immediate place in the cabinet.
And they were same intake, 2015, neighbouring constituency MPs, and do they sort of share?
Well, that's what surprised me about
within the party.
That rage, because there is actually quite a lot of rage in the Labour Party about this. And what surprised me about it is that I never really perceived Keir as having kind of very close friends, and I wouldn't have necessarily put those two together. I mean, I know they're neighbouring constituencies, but Jeremy Corbyn is also his neighbouring MP, so that doesn't really do it.
They were at each other's counts, and you can see there's a kind of physical affection between them.
Are you saying they're having an affair?
No, not at all. No, I'm saying they're.
Sorry, Alex.
Listen,
I'm just being a dick.
Yeah. I don't want to think of Keir Starmer like that, seriously. I imagine he just has plastic mounds where everything ought to be, like a Ken doll.
But interestingly, you talk about his plastic mounds, and I imagine you're talking about his body, but I kind of think of that in his friendships. I imagine he has plastic mounds where friends ought to be. I can't imagine him, in other words, making a bad political call on the basis of pre-existing loyalty and alliance. But that does seem to be what he's done.
Right, so why didn't he follow that advice? Because when he said it at the time, if it was my candidate, their feet wouldn't have touched the floor, I thought, man, you are going to have a whopping majority in a couple of weeks' time. And almost all of the scandal and corruption and whatever is coming inevitably, as it does with running any big organisation, is going to be Labour's. Of course, they'll be peppered around the other parties, but just by sheer volume of numbers of MPs, you are going to face this stuff. So it felt like saying that to Sunak at that time just was like, oh, be careful what you wish for, because this is going to be you and you can't sack them all.
I don't know what's going on with the case at all. The difference with the Gamblegate instance that you cite is that the person who had placed the bet had admitted it. He came out and said, oh shit, yeah, I did that. I didn't realize it would be a problem. And so that's why Keir was saying, you don't need to do some investigation. He said he did it. So it's just a matter of judgment. Just make the decision of whether it's a sackable offence or not. What's happening here is that Tulip Siddiq has been named in a corruption investigation in another country that may well have political motivation. I don't know anything about the politics of that country. And the turnaround of the report from the ethics advisor, independent advisor, has been 1 week.
She didn't breach this ministerial code.
And that she didn't breach the ministerial code. So those are the factors, we know them. My sense is that had she been housing minister, she'd have stayed, or had she been in a sort of middling position in DEFRA, she'd have stayed. But being city minister with responsibility for anti-corruption, you can't have that. You know, she'd be too easy a target, basically. And so that's why I think she went.
Well, some are comparing Tulip Siddique's resignation to Lou Hayes. Zoe, to you, did one feel more jumped than pushed than the other to you?
I mean, everybody thinks that Lou Haig was got rid of because she was too left-wing, right? I've never thought that about Tulip Siddique, even though I do like her.
But I suppose what I'm asking is, do we think that Tulip actually did resign?
Oh, yeah,
in a way that Lou didn't?
Yeah, I mean, the Lou Haig was... I really think... It was disgraceful, actually, how that was handled. You know, she said something about this P&O scandal, which was absolutely common across the Labour Party for the whole time they were in opposition, not to mention being morally, legally, ethically correct. And suddenly she was in the wilderness from that point on, and her departure was a foregone conclusion. I think this is... There is a real problem with Keir's cabinet and Keir's government, which I'm sure we'll talk about at greater length, which is that he will not let anybody go out and build their own persona or brand or ideas or anything. He won't let anybody in cabinet go out and be the person they want to be or have to be. And therefore, when you get a situation like Rachel Reeves suddenly at the mercy of the bond markets, people just don't look at her and think she's got this. And that's not her fault. People think it's her fault because she's boring or because she doesn't explain herself very well or that she's got a bad plan or you can't see what her plan is. But how would anybody see what the Chancellor's plan was the way Keir runs a cabinet? It's not possible. So there's that. So Lou was never allowed to say what she wanted to say. And then when she finally did say it anyway, suddenly she was out on her ear. And secondly, have some values. You can't use an outrage against workers strategically when you're in opposition to flex that you're on the side of the workers and then completely resile from that position within 6 months of entering government. You just can't do that. And I'm surprised that a lawyer who presumably has some kind of consistency wouldn't know that.
The papers and commentators are continuing to speculate over Rachel Reeves' future. Starmer does have a form of backing chief of staff, ministers in trouble, right up to the moment that he doesn't. But sacking a Chancellor of the Exchequer would have vastly more significance than other government roles. Inflation figures that came out on the day that we record this show, better than expected. Is this going to quieten some of the noise that's been coming from mostly right-wing media and commentators calling for her head, which is clearly politically motivated?
It's already had an effect. Both 30-year gilt yields and 10-year gilt yields are relatively sharply down. Today, pound is up against the dollar, which kind of confirms to me what I thought anyway and what I talked about with Vicky Price last week, that the kind of mini panic in the market was largely vibes-based. And so what happens when you have a vibes-based panic is if real data comes out and it's what they call on the upside, then it acts as a corrective. Everyone goes, oh, okay, so it's not as bad as we feared, if that makes sense.
The thing is, right, okay, so just to separate it into what's going on in the markets, the inflation figures, were they 2.5 when everybody was expecting 2.6?
Yep.
So it's not that, it's an upside, it's not a disaster, and it interrupts the narrative. So yeah, but that doesn't forestall a bond yield panic next week. Or,
okay,
you can watch
underlying figures were even better.
You can watch the bond yields. So the bond yields were going up last week by 0.1% every day, and they got to 4.9 by Thursday. And but the government can't afford to. Their plan was keep everything low, don't frighten the horses, bring out this quite bland budget in which the national insurance employers' payments were the headline thing. It was not a big deal. And if the markets can't cope with that, and they're going to push up to 4.9, even if they get good vibes today and bad vibes again tomorrow, you're still looking at a Liz Truss-ish situation. And you're looking at a government that is going to be forced to go back on one of its promises.
these investment markets, they're a beauty pageant. And what matters is not to be the ugliest one in the pageant that gets eliminated by the public's vote. So what was very different about Liz Truss is that everyone else's bond markets were stable at 3%.
For sure.
And ours were shooting up. This isn't the same situation. And actually, the adjustment today has put us right in the pack. It means that we were an outlier just about, and we're kind of no longer an outlier.
But
that matters.
Look, it does make a difference. And you're absolutely right that you can't talk about this as a national situation when it's a global situation and everybody's bond yields are fucked, then everybody's are. But nevertheless, the government cannot afford to do what it wants to do at 4.9. It probably can't at 4.5. So something has to change, right? They're either going to have to put up taxes, or they're going to have to cut benefits or cut something. And if they come out with promising austerity, which Keir sort of semi-did in that AI speech, in that weird, boring AI speech, I think they're in real trouble. But I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying I want Rachel Reeves' job. Quiet riot. Quiet riot.
Well, I'm glad that you mentioned the AI conference. So that happened earlier this week at Google AI HQ, and it was really their attempt to move the news on from all of the headlines on long-term borrowing costs and impact of quantitative tightening, etc., by making a big announcement about their commitment on AI, and it didn't really work. And I found something that Starmer said at the press conference incredulous, and I want your help with getting my head around it. He said, I don't think it's going to take 5 or 10 years to double productivity, not for a moment. I've spent many, many hours pushing this around with AI experts. I'm absolutely confident that the timeframes we are talking about are much, much shorter, and productivity is not sort of 10% increase in productivity. We are talking about many who say productivity will double in a very short period of time. So not the growth rate of productivity, but productivity itself to double. Is that possible?
I mean, considering when you do the long-term studies of how much the internet has increased productivity, and you find that the answer is by nothing at all.
It's definitely decreased my productivity.
It strikes me as vanishingly unlikely.
And that just worries me, because I was concerned when they pre-election were talking about their almost Gordon Brown, like an end to boom and bust. It wasn't those words, but it was those words rehashed into restoring economic stability. I thought, well, this is a global market, there is volatility. You can't control a lot of that. So to sort of go out and make that your pitch, it sets yourself up to fail. And now, again, maybe out of desperation, clutching for, okay, I need something. Oh, AI, that's shiny, that's going to clutch on that. And to then make yourself sound like actually you don't really understand it, backfires on the day when they did really need to go out and try and turn things around, to not manage to do that and then to sort of double down with something that I think will have raised an enormous number of eyebrows. If I was a big investor thinking about whether or not to put my plant in the UK right now, and I heard that, I don't think that speech would have made me go, oh yeah, these are the guys. This is a place to put my
What do you think?
Factory.
Do you think he's kind of announcing himself as an unserious person with that?
I think he's announcing himself as somebody who's a bit weak and scrabbling.
Right. I mean, I agree with that. And I agree with they talk about growth as though they can wish it into being. But which government has ever come in saying, I don't want growth? Everybody always says, wouldn't it be great to have growth? So if that's the strategy... Well,
the Cameron-Clegg government kind of...
But they had a...
But if you come in and say austerity, stringing austerity...
Cameron and Clegg had... No, Cameron and... Yeah, sorry, I always think of it as Cameron and Osborne. No, but they had a theory. It was a bullshit theory, and we all said it at the time. But they had a theory that if you did fiscal tightening, but you pulled back public spending, private investment would rush in its place, and that would create growth. Now, that's not true, but that was the theory. And then Brown had his kind of neo-Keynesian thing, which, we have seen neo-Keynesianism work. It did work, but it was debt-fueled, and that had its own problems. And then Blair had whatever the hell he had. I can't even remember what his economic theory was. And then Johnson, well, never mind him. But there was always a theory. Even Liz Truss had a theory.
Yes.
She had a kind of
She did have a
fundamentalist
theory,
neoliberal theory. But I don't know what Labour's theory is. What's their theory of growth? Because it sounds like it's a Jack and the Beanstalk theory. I'm going to take my desire for growth to the market. Somebody's going to swap it for a bean. And then let's see what happens.
And I think there might be a fundamental dishonesty in talking about growth so much as your number one ambition while not doing the things that would begin to get it for you. And Alex and I talked about this on Sunday School with regards to Europe, which we won't go over again now. There have been now 3 polls in the last week showing a very strong poll result for Reform UK, including one from friend of the show, Luke Trill's More in Common, putting Reform UK neck and neck with Labour on 24%, Tories a smidge ahead on 25%. We've talked before about a first past the post system, meaning that might not return significantly more MPs for Farage, but a regressive non-compete between these two parties on the right that now total 50% of the electorate. As things stand, we are nowhere near a general election, etc., etc. But we saw Lib Dems and Labour do that very effectively at the last election. It could well be something that these two parties do going into the next election. Suella Braverman was on LBC saying that Conservatives should work with Reform.
The Conservative Party failed to tackle immigration. We failed to cut taxes, and we failed to stand up for common sense, patriotic values. And it's our fault that Reform has risen so exponentially. If you look at the polling, look at this last poll that came out yesterday. If you take the collective vote share of the Conservatives and Reform, we're approaching 50% of the vote. And ultimately, I'm someone who really does think that we should do whatever it takes to stop another Labour administration.
Do you think, Zoe, that there is anybody in Labour HQ right now beginning to think about this and worrying about it? And should they be?
Oh, they're freaking the hell out, but they're doing exactly the opposite of what they should be doing, right? So they're just looking at the programme, they're looking at the platform and thinking, where can we mimic them? Where can we outflank them? The truth is they cannot outflank them because their platform is anti-immigrant, anti-Muslim, tariffs probably, pro-Trump. That's the platform. So if you want to outflank those people, you'll make yourself an ineffective tin pot authoritarian without the chops to do it. You just it's completely pointless. But, until you have somebody in the Labour Party who actually realises that, I just see the pacification.
But surely they realise it. But
I did that as a little Greek reference for you.
Thank you.
Surely there are people within the party that know it and recognise that election hacks of old that have been looking at all of this stuff, but they aren't being listened to, or they aren't able to. You've got to look at the party.
You've got to look at how this current iteration of Labour came about. They basically, Keir and more importantly the people surrounding Keir, felt that they'd wrested the party back from its teetering on the brink of becoming a left-wing party, which was the Jeremy Corbyn years. And fair play, there were some massive problems with those years, but they feel they've taken it back for the Labour right, and they're never going to let the left anywhere near it again. And that was the huge wave of expulsions, a lot of strategic expulsions in that period, a lot of freezing out, a lot of the Diane Abbott saga was an absolute case in point. Anybody they could get out or silence, they got out and silenced. And so even though of course there are people in Parliament who understand that you can't outflank Reform to the right because it's so obvious, it's like Jackanory stuff, those aren't the people who have the party's ear.
Beginning in particular the first 200 days, Alex, it was a government of service. It was, we're here to deliver for the people, we are not in it for ourselves.
Yep.
Let's put aside the hiccups for now and look at the good things, their response to the riots, ending the doctor strikes in week 1, turning off the big advertising screens in Euston, for example.
You and Ian are loons.
What would you both pick as your highlights of the first 200 days?
I did like the riots. I think I'm going to go with you. I'm going to take your highlights.
You did like the riots.
Oh, yeah.
I'm not,
She's got the scars.
it's very clippable, but I'm not sure you want us to clip
I thought that was
it was
a grown-up adult response. I find it really hard to take, because there's a lot to like about people. a lot of them, I still really like Ed Miliband. I think his Green stuff is really, really good.
I really like VAT on private schools.
Yeah, I really like it.
Please don't drop that, Labour.
I like a lot of it. But, I look at them and the things they don't have a plan for, and those are the only problems, really, is the markets killing your government and the rise of the far right, and they don't have a plan.
I've been traumatized by the Greek experience, okay, where I did see what happens when a different government comes in and people have that expectation that everything must change now on day one, give them a very, very short amount of goodwill, and then return basically to the same right-wing party that fucked everything in the first place. And so I cannot unpick that from the way I look at things, because it's my constant terror that what we will end up with is actually not a choice between Labour and the Conservatives, but what we will end up with is the same thing Austria ended up with, or the same thing Germany ended up with, or the same thing Poland has ended up with. A choice between the far right and the right.
Yeah.
That's what happens when progressive people don't cooperate and cut each other a little bit of slack. And so that's what terrifies me. I'm not ideologically pro-Starmer, or, my politics are very to the left of Starmer. Like I said, after the Tsipras experience, what I feel almost like scar tissue on me is that we have to get used to a process of consolidation and banking small wins in order to make headway. Otherwise, if we keep going, it's everything or nothing. The answer comes back always nothing.
The thing I would take issue with in that is that I am not a progressive, or I am not a represented progressive, if living standards aren't going up for people who haven't got any money, and if immigrants are left to drown in the sea. No party that won't make that case for me is ever going to have my cooperation. I'm not going to consolidate with that party. I'm not going to give it any slack. I'm just not going to do it, because I'm 51 years old. I mean, I know that sounds like a mic drop moment, but, I've been making my peace with not quite right left-wing projects since I was old enough to vote. And I'm definitely not going to do it for a party that doesn't say anything that I want to hear.
I get that. I was where you are, like I said. And then suddenly, I got kind of punched in the face so hard.
But I don't want to.
That it's not a rational reaction. I fully own up to that.
It's an emotional reaction. I don't want to Welsh Spain Greek politics to you, but I don't think the brief flirtation with the left is anything like Keir's government. They were quite radical. Tsipras was quite radical.
Yes, but the essential breaking point was exactly the same, that even however radical or non-radical you are, once you're in government, you have to make compromises, because you have to make actually choices between what do you funnel money towards and what you don't. And the moment you make those choices and those compromises, the entire left goes traitor. Your political landscape is kind of permanently fucked. But it's as much a cry of anguish towards the Labour Party as it is towards other progressive people. Because I spend my day kind of going, oh, for fuck's sake, why are you doing that?
Yeah.
You give people something to support.
Yeah.
I think we can all agree on that. Final question then in this section. They've done 200 days. It has actually gone quite quickly when you think about a 5-year term, and they don't have many sets of 200 days left, and certainly only...
What's this? Is it an eighth?
Well, indeed. It is.
Yeah,
it is about an eighth. About an eighth of the way through. Elections will come in a couple of months' time locally. Scotland and Wales the year after, so not long until there are some pretty big actual polls for people to go to. What do you think they need to get on top of fastest? Zoe, it feels like from you, it's either something big social issue to throw a bone to progressive voters to actually turn them out, or probably really tackling cost of living, like of their multitude of issues. wardrobe gate, farmers, resignations of ministers, you name it, they've had issues like hell in the first 200 days. There was very little honeymoon period. But of all of the things that have been, going badly for them, which are the things you think they really need to prioritise in order to not get punished at actual elections that will be happening before the next general election?
At the local elections?
Yeah.
I think they're going to get punished anyway for those.
So very little.
I don't think there's a lot they can do. If I were them, I would be looking to... they need to find some way to signal that they understand that the economy... They need to find some way to tell people first that it's not just a UK problem; it's a European problem, and we're gonna fix it together. So I would signal that we're going to get on better with Europe, right? Because that is A, a growth strategy, and B, the only way you're going to meet the market turbulence.
I haven't paid her to say this.
Well, it's true, and with that in mind, I would stop being so pig-headed about young people's freedom of movement, which isn't about the young people's visa scheme, and I would just throw that out immediately. And then via that, I would really start to strategize, if not come straight out with a real plan to meet reform, which is to say everything you stand for, we hate. And this is what we would do instead, rather than, oh, yeah, maybe immigration came too fast.
Mine would also be around student visas, actually. I am quite surprised no one has kind of thought of this yet, because of the way the migration statistics are calculated. Apparently, there's an international convention that you have to count people who are in the country for 2 years or more, right? And so I would be going out to the universities and say, do like 1 year, 4-term courses, pack the country with those so that you can have a flood of people who can work part-time, who can deposit loads of lovely money to this country, leave having been affected by our soft power and becoming ambassadors of the UK abroad, but not count in those,
migration
incredibly
numbers.
scary migration statistics. So that would be, I guess, my low-hanging fruit. Like, do that.
Well, one of the things on this very topic, and Zoe just mentioned youth mobility scheme, we've got 13 of them already in place. Uruguay to Japan, across the globe, right? I looked at the numbers last year. 23,000 people from those countries in aggregate came to the UK under that scheme. 26,000 Brits went under that scheme to Australia alone. So actually, youth mobility arguably reduces net migration.
Yeah.
It's really popular. It unclips the wings of young British people, gets loads of great people into the UK, as Alex just mentioned, who can then go home to be ambassadors for the brilliant cultural and social and whatever experiences they've had in the UK in their countries that they grew up in, and everyone is a winner. So completely agree with that one. And listeners, we do have a call to action for you this week. Alex has got one. Go for it, Alex.
So there's a petition going on at the moment on the government side about an independent valuation of the cash review and child services, which has already sort of reached the first milestone. So it's had a response from the government, and the response from the government is quite unsatisfactory, because what they're saying is sort of, we weren't able to get enough quality evidence on this, so we're not going to do.
Remind us what the CAS review was.
So the CAS review was a broad review about health services that trans people receive, broadly speaking. It sought evidence, and the evidence that came in was basically not incredibly high quality. But because there was a little bit of a moral panic, there was a notion that not doing anything would be better. Okay. The problem is there are now GPs refusing trans people HRT and things, which is effectively reversing the process, the hormonal process that they're gone with, because they feel that it's kind of safer to just say no to trans people. It's created a strange culture. And all this petition is asking for is some peer-reviewed, proper evidence on this issue to go in. And I don't think that's controversial, even for people who are skeptical about this issue. We should be aiming for the best evidence available out there. It's not good enough to say, well, we didn't get much evidence on this the first time, so we're just going to park it, because there's real damage being caused So I would say, however you feel on this issue, you should be supporting the notion of best evidence available. And so we're trying to get to 100,000 so that it does get a debate.
I have just signed it.
Good.
While you were talking about it,
Excellent.
we're going to share a link in the show notes.
Okay, I will sign it.
We are all
Quick,
about evidence-based policy making on this show. Thank you, Alex.
Quiet riot. Quiet riot.
And now it's everyone's favourite moment of the week. It's time for Wokey Dokey.
Wokey Dokey. Wokey Dokey.
Today's Wokey Dokey involves a past guest, Zach Polanski from
Deputy Leader of the Green
of the
Party.
Green Party, yes, who's in the London Assembly, and he's the chair of the Environmental Committee. Now, there were some Tory members of that committee who staged a walkout.
What, at the GLA?
Yeah, they were doing an evidence session about swimmable rivers. Zach chairs that committee, and he has said that whenever I'm taking evidence from a panel, I won't do it if it's a manel. Basically, you have to have gender balance. And so when people
Or gender representation,
Yeah.
even if it's not balanced.
Yeah, exactly. So when people suggested people for this session, he opted for a woman in Lewisham, from Lewisham instead of a man from Bromley, in order for there to be
A woman.
on the panel. And the Conservative members thought this was an act of outrageous wokery, favouring inner London, Lewisham, instead of outer London, Bromley. I mean, they literally border each other, and walked out. And Susan Hall...
Oh, Susan, she's
yeah,
back.
she still exists. She tweeted, "This stupid nonsense must stop," etc., etc. You can guess how the rest went. And I just wanted to play you a little clip, actually, just because it's almost endearing.
We wanted an Outer London Council rep on the panel. Instead, the chair decided to invite an Inner London Council rep and decided to exclude Bromley Council, who we were originally engaging with, because of the gender of the speaker they were going to send.
Yeah, everything Tom has said is correct. I mean, this is just yet another classic example of left-wing wokery. And we've had enough, and we're not going to put up with it. We're not going to put up with the wokery. We're not going to put up with all this virtual signalling.
Virtual.
I love that. Can I just tell you how much I love virtual signalling? So, yeah, I mean, that's quite a signal to send to half the population. It's like, if
Slightly more than half.
If there's a woman on the panel, I'm out of here. So I thought that was quite a good example of wokery battling, I apologise, blokery.
Well done, Zach.
Quiet riot.
In the iconic final scene of Some Like It Hot, Jack Lemmon, disguised as Josephine, tries to explain to millionaire Osgood Fielding III all the reasons that mean they cannot get married. I'm not a natural blonde. I have a past. I can never have children. I smoke. Finally explaining, Osgood, I'm a man. To which the response comes,
Well, nobody's perfect.
and so it was with Pete Hegseth's confirmation hearing in the Senate. When the allegation of sexual assault was put to him, which he maintains was consensual, despite paying off the woman who alleged it, with whom he was cheating on his mistress, with whom he was cheating on his wife, his ultimate response was, I'm not a perfect person, but I was saved by the grace of God, by Jesus and Jenny.
Who's Jenny?
It's the
One of them.
mistress that then became the wife. I'm not a perfect person, but redemption is real, and God forged me.
On Memorial Day 2014, at a CVA event in Virginia, you needed to be carried out of the event for being intoxicated?
Senator, anonymous smears.
Just true or false? Very simple. Summer of 2014 in Cleveland, drunk in public with the CVA team.
Anonymous smears.
I'm just asking for true or false questions, true or false answers. An event in North Carolina, drunk in front of 3 young female staff members after you had instituted a no alcohol policy and then reversed it. True or false?
Anonymous smears.
December of 2014 at the CVA Christmas party at the Grand Hyatt at Washington, D.C., you were noticeably intoxicated and had to be carried up to your room. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
Another time, a CVA staffer stated that you passed out in the back of a party bus. Is that true or false?
Anonymous smears.
So,
I love that scene.
So, as we record, it is Pam Bondi that is being questioned on her appointment as Attorney General. You may remember that Pam was second choice behind Matt Gaetz. All of these people will be approved, won't they?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think the numbers are they only need 3 Republicans. If every Democrat votes against, they only need 3 Republicans. But there is absolutely no sign of those 3 Republicans. And there's no guarantee that every Democrat will vote against him.
Yeah.
And you do read some of the, it's quite impassioned. Some of the Democratic spokespeople, like, absolutely astonished that they're even in that position. They're even standing there having to ask a guy who's up for defense secretary whether he really thinks women shouldn't be in the military and nor should gay people. It's just like the pain of just the way they're expressing themselves is really, it leaps off the page. Because, obviously you're sitting reading the paper and you think, 3 tiny Republicans, surely you can get 3 under the wire. But of course you can't. They're basically giving up their career as they go into a really, savagely non-pluralistic regime.
So can I circle back to our previous conversation? Can I just circle back to our previous conversation and just drive home once again that there is a difference between a disappointing government and one that takes the absolute piss. There is a difference between Tulip Sadiq referring herself to an ethics advisor, that advisor making his report in the space of a week, and Boris Johnson kind of having 2 of them resign because they made a finding that he ignored, and then not even appointing an ethics advisor. Like there was not one in post for the last 2 years of the Conservative government. So I'm sorry to circle back to that, but, we really do need this kind of electroshock therapy to be going on all the time and be looking at that and going,
but for the grace of God, go we.
What's going on is pretty shit, but it can get a lot worse.
I think there's something, though, in this authoritarian streak that Zoe describes happens within the Labour Party and the dissent and the, no one's allowed to be critical, no one's allowed to build their own profile, no one's allowed to challenge, that I find incongruous with not slapping down the Trumps and the Musks when they behave so appallingly towards him personally and the UK corporately. Yeah. And that I think, well, if you're able to sort of show that kind of spine and backbone and tough love approach within your party, could you do a bit of it on behalf of the country, please?
I think that's actually a classic. That's like a kind of domestic bully, isn't it? They're the big man in their own kitchen. But then, if they won't front up to a neighbour.
We're having that debate again about Hugh Grant in Love Actually, where, everyone loves that monologue and kind of cheers for him. But if he did it in real life, I would probably be furious. I would probably be going, what are you doing?
Where are we at with Tulsi Gabbard? She's one of your favourites to monitor, isn't she, Alex?
Do you know that Tulsi Gabbard?
No.
Okay, so she's proper conspiracy nut. She used to be a Democrat, stood against Hillary Clinton, dropped out in the first round, then started spinning into QAnon deep state type stuff. Pizzagate, all of that, became a Fox contributor, then became a sort of Fox host, then became too right-wing for Fox and started her own podcast where she propagates proper conspiracy theories. And she's the person that Trump has picked to be the head of the intelligence committee, like the CIA, the FBI, all of that. She's one that might struggle to get through. Her hearing has been delayed now till after the inauguration.
Do we know why?
Yes, because the Democrats pointed out that she hadn't submitted quite literally all the paperwork that she needs to submit. Like, she hasn't had the proper qualifications and background checks and disclosures and signed the agreements that she needs to sign in order to see confidential information and all of that. And so they've used that to push her hearing a little bit into the long grass. And I think that will be a very tasty one because she's genuinely, and if you look at like her whole life history, she kind of grew up in a cult.
Yeah, I was going to say she sounds like quite a damaged individual.
Yeah. I mean, how has there not been a Lifetime biopic? I have no idea. I would watch it.
You should make it.
Have you watched the Martha Stewart documentary?
Yeah, I have.
It's really good.
I haven't. Is it good?
Oh, yeah, it's really good.
Little cheeky recommendation.
What are we expecting on Monday then? Obviously, we know that Mark Zuckerberg has funneled $1 million into the inauguration
everyone
party.
has, apparently.
Everyone's digging deep to make it all singing, all dancing. It's going to be country and western singers. The village people are going to be there.
I mean, they're unbelievable because even the village people are not the village people, right? It's like my grandfather's broom. Every single member has been replaced 4 times.
Except one.
Except one.
I saw a very, very funny post and I can't remember who it was, so I'm sorry if I'm pillaging your work, that said basically there's only one of the original village people left and he now says he's not gay and that YMCA was never a gay anthem. So really we're talking about the village idiot.
Are we going to brace ourselves for it? Are we going to ignore it and...
Well, I mean, it's difficult.
Drink ourselves into a stupor on Monday. How are you?
It's difficult, isn't it? Because, we're not the rioters. We're not the people who put Viking helmets on. We're not the people who kidnap Nancy Pelosi or try to. We're just not those people. And the us's of America are not those people either. So I think you just have to pretend it's not happening. Don't surrender in advance, but you don't have to watch either.
Yeah.
Do we think we're going to have a breakthrough in Israel-Gaza before Monday?
Yes, I think so. And this is, do you remember we were talking about that, Zoe, ages ago? I think I was saying that second and third order effects are very difficult to predict. Trump in the White House a second time is objectively a terrible thing, but that doesn't mean it can't cause second and third order very good things. And I think people do get that wrong. They expect everything that flows from it to be terrible. The thing I wanted to ask was, do we need a reasonable level of detachment, or should we be actively paying attention and resisting? There is a school of thought that says, if I tuned out today and did not read a single item of US news for the next 4 years, chances are I could then tune back in, there would be a new administration, and nothing will have happened directly that I will notice in my everyday life. There is another school of thought that says you really can't take your eye off this stuff because we're now in an environment where, especially through social media, they coordinate with each other, they copy strategies from each other, and actually their fight is very much our fight, even more than it was 2016. What do you think?
The thing is, I think that it's meddlesome. American politics is meddlesome. If you look at Musk in Germany, Musk here, it's both headline meddlesome in the sense that it's taking the fight to even not particularly left-wing governments, and it's backdoor meddlesome. It's funding think tank networks that give us horrible narratives.
And social media influencers.
Yeah, and social media influencers and social media networks. And, say Musk is put in charge of American TikTok. That's going to have a huge impact on what British kids are watching, because this is one ecosystem now. I don't think that you can take your eye off it, but nor do I think that slavishly following it is in any way empowering or or constructive. I think you have to think of yourself as in an existential battle with a kind of post-neoliberal right wing that is coming for everybody's democracy. And
a sort of Cthulhu.
Yeah. So I'm watching it really closely with your hands clasped is not what's going to work.
But I also think you're right that it is one ecosystem. And I'm certainly seeing more and more, particularly men in my life, not that I have, loads of lovers or anything like that, but, men that
She has
I
a
know,
fair few, just not lots.
And they're not, absorbing that kind of right-wing stuff. But men who I know, husbands of friends, distant, cousin-y kind of men, more and more in WhatsApp groups, they are talking constantly about American politics as if it is UK politics. They so identify to the strongman theory of history. They really like the muscular authoritarianism of Trump and Musk, and to an extent Farage, though noticeably less so, actually. And they do listen to Musk on him saying Farage wasn't good enough and needed to leave Reform UK. And I think if we're not following at least a little bit what is happening that side of the pond, it's going to be harder and harder for us to challenge and rebut and cajole the people in our lives that are being heavily targeted through the algorithms with this kind of stuff. And dare I say it, brainwashed to an extent. Then we lose them completely. And then I think it becomes very dangerous very quickly. I personally can't and won't check out of it because I think that abdicates some responsibility to challenge what you are going to hear from people in your life.
Okay, I'm with both of you. I do think you need kind of a mixture, but I do think that begins with an acknowledgement, and I don't wish to speak for both of you. I'm about to admit something that I find difficult to admit, that there is a level of dopamine and perverse enjoyment thinking back to the last 4 years of Trump, to getting up in the morning and logging on and thinking, oh, what crazy thing has he said now, and getting outraged about it. And that's not easy to admit, but there was a kind of adrenaline rush to getting into that pattern. And I think maybe one needs to actively make a point of not doing that, of not getting into his rhythm, I guess. There is a way of keeping an eye on the news, there's a way of being informed, of expressing your opinion, that doesn't kind of synchronize yourself with their schedule and their agenda. And I know it's a hard thing to suggest, but that's what I'm suggesting.
Yeah, no, I completely get what you mean, but I feel exactly as conflicted about how much of a thrill I get from news. Like just any news. I'm like, wow, news.
Give me news.
Partly why I don't love Christmas.
I mean, I do love Christmas, but I do not like no news.
No, I hate it. Or silly season in August.
But there hasn't been a silly season in I don't know how many years.
Yeah.
Thank God.
But I just wonder whether you can just accept that that's how you are without making the whole thing become spectacle for you. Because I think the last Trump administration was consequential for American politics in a way that Kaiser Wilhelm was consequential for German politics. Just because he died doesn't mean what happened after wasn't partly pitch-rolled by that period.
I accept. I accept that completely. I'm just not sure that you are necessarily in a better state to resist, to fight, to make decisions by being constantly frazzled than you would be by not. I would suggest the latter is a better state of being. I mean, I've tried to make a small adjustment and I find that it has made a difference to me.
What is that?
Well, just because of what my patterns were. So I used to get up in the morning, I used to put Radio 4 on.
Stop doing that for a start.
Make a coffee and sit down and look at social media. And now I make a point of actually making my coffee, not putting on the news, checking on messages from family, whatever.
WhatsApping Naomi to say, why haven't you done this, that and the other?
There's some of that going on.
Yeah.
Or, reading film reviews or entertainment stories or whatever. So I do something else for an hour. And I have found that that makes a big difference to me because it means that I assert my authority on my day. And I know that sounds like a stupid thing, but actually it makes a difference. It makes me feel slightly more in control.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am a news junkie and I just lean into it because I find I can take myself out of politics, but I can't take politics out of myself. And so I'm not actually happier when I step away.
She ain't having any of it.
So now I lean in, suck it up, pump it straight into my veins, the sweet, sweet news.
Yeah. She goes to spinning class with Nick Robinson in her ears.
Oh my God, I would find that so unmotivating.
Quiet riot. And now it's time for a little bit of a warm feeling inside. No, it's not time for tequila shots. I mean, it's time for Grin and Share It.
Good news is welcome to me. Bad news is hell come to me. Good news. Do-de-o-do-lo, do-de-o-do-lo, I want good news.
What have you got for us, Naomi?
The batteries used in our phones, devices, even cars rely on metals like lithium and cobalt. And these are often sourced through really intensive, environmentally, but often exploitative of people mining practices, sometimes even children. And demand for those critical materials is just going up and up and up, expected to skyrocket over the next few decades. But here's the good news. Innovation in science is once again riding to the rescue. A team in Northwestern University has a cunning plan. They're using a waste molecule, triphenyl phosphine oxide, TPPO from here on in.
Okay.
Thousands and thousands of tons of this byproduct are made every year from organic industrial process, and it's rendered totally useless and has to be very carefully discarded following production. But very clever chemists have found a new one-pot reaction means they can turn TPPO into a usable product with the potential to store energy, which could mean we get the long-imagined battery type redox flow. So unlike lithium and other solid-state batteries, which store energy in electrodes, redox flow batteries use a chemical reaction to pump energy back and forwards between electrolytes, where the energy is then stored. And it's not quite as efficient as energy storage, but redox flow batteries are thought to be much better for the environment, better solutions for energy storage long-term, if not in our phones, our mobile phones, at the scale of the grid itself. So this could potentially be a real game changer. To evaluate the molecule's resilience as a potential agent in energy storage, a team at Northwestern ran tests using static electrochemical charge and discharge experiments, and they did it over and over and over and over again. And after 350 rounds, the battery maintained remarkable health, losing negligible capacity over time. Please, Apple, if you are listening, the designed obsolescence of your fucking batteries in your iPhones. Could you please look into this and maybe fund this happening? Because I would really, really, really like my mobile phone to stop dying after 5 minutes usage once it gets over a year old.
Yeah. Can I just say that Apple are definitely listening, but not in an intensive way. Just in the background.
And Apple, we love you. Keep us in the news and politics chart, please. This is just a bit of friendly investment advice.
Thank you, Naomi. Listeners, will drop a link in the show notes of this amazing thing. It sounds like alchemy, doesn't it?
Well, yeah, and to take a waste product.
Turning some incredibly useless thing into something useful. So we'll drop a link in the show notes so you can not just grin, but also share it. And that's a wrap for this week's Quiet Riot. Zoe.
Yes.
Thank you so very much for joining us once more.
Thank you for having me. I've loved seeing you both.
You really do feel like part of the family now, really.
And thank you, listeners, for tuning in. Don't forget, if you'd like to join our editorial meeting, which is on the 26th of January, which is a Sunday at 11 a.m, be sure to sign up as a monthly backer before then on ko-fi.com/Quiet Riot Pod.
Plus, whether you're a paid-up supporter or not, leave us a review. Wherever you get your podcasts, make sure you're subscribed and follow us on social media at Quiet Riot Pod.
We've got a cracking lineup of guests over the next few months. And plenty of extra episodes in between the main shows. And yes, you are going to be getting more Andreou coming your way very soon. with the launch of his brand new show on Greek mythology.
Yeah. Podyssey.
The big reveal of the name, The Podyssey, with Andreou.
So, I've never been more excited or more exhausted in my entire life. But I hope it'll be worth it. For now, stay dry, stay sane. The longer days are coming. And remember, we love you lots. Thanks for listening.
Bye.
Bye.
Quite Right is an audio production by Cooler Heads with Naomi Smith and Andreou. Produced by Kenny Campbell. Music by Mariana Sangeeta. Artwork by Simona Canelu. And edited by me, Alex Rees. Quiet Riot is a co-production with Sandstone Global.
Quiet Riot. They're using a waste molecule, triphenyl phosphine oxide, TPPO from here on in.
Okay.
Which is a byproduct.
Is it a member of the CPTPP?
Yeah, which stands for what?
Good. Something. I don't know. I know the initials. I don't have to know the full thing.
Anyway, thousands and thousands
TPPO, yeah.
TPPO